think, can you see Roy in the shot? I think that's really cute. That's pretty cute. Until he leaves, yeah, let's move on.
Cheers.
Hey, cheers, guys.
Cheers.
Happy Friday. Let's get started, shall we? All right, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hey, what's going on, guys? My name is Harrison.
My name is Alex.
And this is your favorite podcast. Let's start it off right at the top. This is our favorite podcast. Did you eat yet? It's our podcast right here. And today, I'm super excited because we got our very, very special guest.
It's always a special guest.
He came a very far away from his room.
Always very far away.
Our third roommate, everyone, Andrew Rho. What's going on, man? Woo!
Hey guys, glad to be here. We got Roy the Boy here too. Shout out to Roy the Boy.
Shout out to Roy the Boy, man.
Shout out to Roy the Boy.
Sup, dog? Sup, dog?
Man, he's comfortable.
Yeah, dude, he's been loving quarantine, because the whole family's home all day. We're out here, spending so much more time with him. So I think he loves it.
Man, we love having him too. He sheds a little bit, but I love having him.
Yeah, it's always good to have a fourth roommate.
For sure.
That's true.
Pays no rent.
Zero rent.
Pays no rent. So tell me, Andrew, how have you been spending your time lately in quarantine?
Yeah, that's a good question. So let's see. Things got really bad
around March.
Yeah. In New York. Things were pretty bad. Things were locked down, and we couldn't really go out and do stuff. My parents were super worried about me, and my whole family in Korea was like, "Oh my gosh, our Andrew's out there in New York struggling." And meanwhile, I was just hanging out here, working from home, playing FIFA,
living your best life, honestly.
Living my best life, But yeah, I mean, they were super worried, and I had the opportunity to go spend some time with my girlfriend Jeannie and her family out in the suburbs of Pennsylvania for about 2 months. So, yeah, I was out there for 2 months.
What's that switch up like? Like suburb versus like urban life.
Honestly,
I feel like you left and you never wanted to come back. I feel like that's how I felt.
I wasn't living with you, but I assume that was probably the case.
Honestly, it was fantastic. Oh man, Jeannie's mom, shout out to the Sun family. Oh, Jeannie's mom is so good at cooking. Jeannie's dad is such an amazing human. Benji was still there, and so it was fun to hang out with Benji.
Rest in peace, Benji, one time.
Rest in peace.
Rest in peace, Benji.
Got to hang out with her little sister, Annie, too. So, yeah, we had a good time. Honestly, I was really nervous about it going in. Who's going to spend 2 months with someone else's family, especially during the quarantine. But
for sure,
honestly, praise God, they were super just welcoming, and it was a good time. And you're kind of right. I was enjoying it a little too much.
I'm seeing you taking these photos out in the woods, you biking in the woods and stuff like that. Just he texted me one time and he was like, "Oh, you should come out here, I don't know why you're stuck in that apartment, come out and live in the suburbs." And I'm like,
"That's not my girlfriend."
That's not my girl. That's not my girl. Yeah.
So did your parents have to convince you to go to Pennsylvania, or did they want you to stay, or did they want you to come to California? What was the situation like for that?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So they definitely wanted me to come to California, but at the time it was just so uncertain. California was a hot spot, and New York was it was bad. So no one wanted to risk going to through the airport system, and so that wasn't really an option. The next best option was to either stay here or go out into the suburbs. And I had my reservations because again, staying with someone else's family is really daunting. But yeah, my parents were like, "You got to do it. We don't want to lose you." So I was like, "All right, I'll do it for you guys."
But didn't you tell me though, after 2 months, they're kind of like, "Hey, you had to do it, but you should go back home now."
It's time to go.
It's time to go because I was in a
that's a
similar
Korean
situation.
way, you know what I mean?
And then your parents start feeling obligated to the other parents.
Oh, 100%. 100%. So the timeline of that was I was there first couple weeks, I was tiptoeing around, but immediately they welcomed me and I was already family. And I was super comfortable. At a certain point, I almost, didn't really want to go back to my cramped New York apartment and have to figure out groceries and do all this cooking and stuff. So I was really living it up out there. That was my second best life,
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I did the same thing, and I actually went to Pennsylvania, so I discovered Wawa and
because you lived with your girlfriend's parents too, right?
Exactly.
Dude, we should have hung out, man.
I know, right?
We missed out.
I know, we missed a good opportunity there to start our own podcast. Just kidding.
Did you drink yet?
Did you drink yet?
Second podcast.
Sorry, Pastor Aaron. But no, yeah, you're totally right. Because after a certain point, my parents were like, "All right, New York is fine. You should probably get out of there."
Fair enough.
But you also went to SF to spend some time with your parents too, right?
Yeah. So from May to July, I was out in California for about 2 months. Thank you. and it was nice to spend time with family. I was telling my girlfriend, man, like I would love to be able to spend an extended period of time with my family, and somehow it ended up happening. 2 months out there in rural Manteca.
That's
but
facts.
It was a good time.
Because we don't get that anymore as adults, right? It's like the likelihood that we get to spend extended period over beyond just a holiday or a weekend with our parents, you're talking like a month or two, it's not going to really happen. I feel like one of my friends told me that too. It's like, when I was younger, I would never want to live with my parents extended because like we'd fight, they'd nag and stuff like that. But when you're an adult and they respect you like an adult, like it's totally different where, you're just like looking at your peer and you're just like seeing their flaws as well as they get older, and then you just want to help each other out. And so I've heard very, very good things. I kind of regret the fact that I haven't taken that opportunity to stay with my parents extended, but I'm so glad that you did.
Yeah, I mean, he got the best of both too, because he got to hang out with his parents, and they got to hang out with Jeannie's parents, and I think it's already rare to hang out with your parents for that long, but to be able to hang out with future like father-in-law, mother-in-law for that long.
Fingers crossed. Fingers
crossed, of course, but just being able to have that opportunity to spend that much time, then they get to know the real Andrew, not just like this very tiptoed version of Andrew. So that's pretty good. Yeah.
No, that's true. So tell me, Andrew, what do you do for our listeners who like don't really know you? Like, what do you do for a living? How you been spending your time? What's your 9 to 5 look like?
Yeah, appreciate you asking. I work for a company called LiveRamp. And for those of you guys who don't know LiveRamp, it's a marketing tech platform where we enable brands and advertisers to really use their data in the most effective way.
It's clear he said that a lot. You know what I mean? It's clear that he says this to his client, his brand new clients. It's very obvious he says this a lot.
So
getting rattled right now.
So
don't mess up.
Yeah, I know, right? I won't pitch it to you guys, but essentially, yeah, we're a marketing platform, and I work as a solutions engineer. And what that really means is I am part of the sales conversations, helping our clients understand our product better. I kind of act as the product expert for them, helping them understand what use cases they can unlock. And so I'm really helping out the sales conversations from a technical perspective.
For sure. And I think that's interesting because he comes from a kind of a different background. He doesn't really come from a tech background. He actually originally worked in financial services, I guess. He worked at Amex. So I find it so interesting. What was that transition like? How was that differing? I know that you initially, you weren't even thinking about going into solutions engineering. You just kind of, took the opportunity that showed up. And so I'm curious how you feel about that so far.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think it's interesting that you can't really plan your career. Things kind of just happen, and you have to react with it to the best of your abilities. For me, when I was at American Express, I was doing some corporate finance and some internal strategy. It was a lot of good fun, but I wanted to do something that was a little closer to a product. Instead of doing high level strategy, I wanted to be closer to a product and also work for a more of a tech company. I wanted to be in an industry where things are changing a little bit faster. There's more innovation. And so I kind of started looking all over the place, and I found LiveRamp. I saw their platform was really cool, really interesting. The work they did provided a lot of value. And I first started off kind of as a technical account manager of sorts, really helping our clients do everything with our platform. I had to be really a lot more technical. I wasn't like anywhere software engineering level technical, but from my background, and I studied business in undergrad, it was really hard because all of a sudden I had to work on the command line, move around, manipulate files, do this and that. And so, yeah, it was quite challenging at first. And not only that, but Harrison, you know this, like the advertising industry has like so many players.
It's wild, Joe. It's wild.
It's wild. You ever see that like chart where like there's just like, here's the 500 top players in the ad tech industry.
Yeah.
Like it's just insane how many companies are out there doing interesting work. And as LiveRamp, as a platform that is a network that connects to all these different platforms, you all of a sudden have to know a little bit about every company. And
for sure.
Going from nothing to
you got to be
that,
a fake expert about everything. You got to be like jack of all trades kind of thing. Like
exactly.
Maybe fake is a little too strong, but you got to be basically an expert in the eyes of your clients for everything.
Exactly. Yeah, I was going to correct you on that one.
Not fake.
Not fake. Real.
To all my clients out there, it's real knowledge.
True expertise. True expertise.
So
my bad.
I think Harrison kind of knows about your transition, but I know a lot of people that want to get into tech or break into tech. And what kind of recommendations would you have for someone that had little to no experience in tech to somehow joining as a account technical, what was it called again?
Well, I acted as a technical account manager. But
Right,
my
and then you
title was
transitioned into a solutions engineer, or
yeah, pretty much.
But yeah,
So-
tech is hot. I feel like everyone wants to go into tech lately.
Yeah. So what was the secret sauce, if you don't mind sharing it?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. To like, I think there's no one right answer, and it obviously depends on what kind of role you're going for. If you want to become a software engineer, I don't think you can just learn on the job. I don't think you can just kind of fake it till you make it kind of thing. And not to say that I did that in my role, but as a technical account manager, my job is to be an expert of my platform for my clients. But no one's going to be an expert of the platform until you work there, right? And so, at least for me, the biggest strength that I had to display was, hey, I have the aptitude to learn something, and I have the curiosity for it. I have the passion, as well as the communication skills to be able to convey what I'm learning in front of my clients. So, I guess, yeah, really tangibly. For a technical account manager role, I think that's what the type of skills you want to really display. I think consultants are perfect for it because they're always context switching. They're always figuring out, the other person's needs, their client's needs. And so, yeah.
Awesome. That's so cool. And I know that recently you saw that documentary, Social Dilemma. How do you feel about that? Because I feel like it ties in pretty well with what you do for a living too, at least what your company does.
Yeah, I think the Social Dilemma has a lot of interesting points. And have you seen the documentary?
Yeah. Actually, I saw it with you.
Well,
Where was I? Thanks for the invite.
I think you watched it without
You watched
us.
it before us.
Wow, we all just kind of screwed each other.
But what like regarding that documentary, there's a lot about things about how kind of scary all the data mining is from all the social networks that we use, and then how that can definitely change our perception through advertising, through different messaging. So I'm curious, like, what was your takeaway from that movie, and like, is it was it 100% correct? Is there some stuff that's a little bit embellished? Is there some stuff that they didn't even talk about that you kind of have a little bit more maybe insight into?
Yeah, well, just, as a disclaimer, anything I say is not like an official statement from LiveRamp. And, the social dilemma.
Legality, of course.
This guy's a professional, man.
That documentary I thought was really interesting, and it kind of revolved mostly around Facebook as well as Instagram. And, they're one of our greatest partners. And so I can't speak on behalf of them or in reaction to them. I do think that the documentary definitely had some valid points and some reasons for concern in terms of, how wise are you being on the platform? And I think, part of that is going to be an individual's kind of responsibility. Me personally, I actually, I don't really even want to be on Instagram sometimes, but
How come? Why?
because for me, I'm also an optimizer. I like to be efficient with my time. And you guys know this about me, but I like to kind of do things with my time that are more useful or maybe seemingly like always learning something. And for me, Instagram is something that's very distracting because it's really interesting to see everyone's lives. And so sometimes I wish I could kind of cut that out, but there is such a trade-off there. You kind of lose touch with your friend group sometimes, or if you're not seeing everything. But anyway, going back to your question of like my reaction to that, I think that kind of calls the need for, really like responsible product design and responsible ways of using data. And I mean, to pitch LiveRamp a little bit, I think that's what LiveRamp does best.
Here we go.
Oh,
Hit me.
Yeah, to entertain us. What do you mean LiveRamp does best?
Well, the whole core of LiveRamp being able to, move data between different partners is that we create a universal ID that can that can be used as kind of the keys to the kingdom of, hey, this ID is going to connect you to Google, to Twitter, to Trade Desk, all these different platforms. And it does so in an anonymous way. And so I think we remove the individual's personal information from that transaction of data. And so in that way, we kind of make it more safe.
Interesting. If I had to push back a little bit on that, though, why would companies find that appealing if they want specific targeting for advertisements, right? Because you don't want to waste your money on people that aren't interested. Say I'm interested in stocks, but then like they give me videos about something completely different. Why would I be interested in that?
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think.
Do you get, sorry about that, or do you just get put into a bucket of like IDs that suddenly that you're categorized as this one thing?
Yeah, so that's a really great question. When a brand or advertiser or agency does any sort of programmatic campaigns, they're taking personal information on you. So alexlee@gmail.com, and they know certain details about you. Things you're interested in based on maybe purchasing behavior or things like that, and if they want to target you on a variety of platforms, like on Google products or on Facebook products or Twitter, all they have is your Gmail. They don't have the type of IDs that these players might intake. Yeah, maybe Google and Facebook, maybe they have your email. Maybe Twitter does too.
Sure.
But they all transact on their own ID spaces as well, which are Google cookies or Facebook user IDs or mobile devices. And what LiveRamp is in the business of doing is collecting a graph that in an anonymous way
In an encrypted way, yeah.
Exactly. Kind of encrypts, or it kind of matches everything so that we have a unified ID that removes your name from that picture, but at the same time allows companies to complete that addressability and be able to serve you a targeted ad.
That's pretty cool. I mean, I think general concerns about data and data privacy is about their own personal information being exposed, whether it's like passwords or...
And that's what the whole movie was about, right? So...
Yeah, I mean, the movie had a mix of that, but it was also just about how younger generations are generally using the phones.
That Gen Z stuff, that's just like we knew that. We knew that was going to be a problem. There's no way you can be inundated with all this content, all these different forms of social media, and not have any repercussions in terms of socialization, your mental ability. It's going to be different.
That's the scary part, though, is you don't even know what the repercussions of using that much technology at such a young age, right? For us, it was all about using the Game Boy, but not often we use Game Boys every day. It was you go outside, play with your friends, but now everything is so surrounded over your phone, and even parents, they need to relax, so they want to use the phone. So
it's too easy, you know what I mean?
It's too easy to just give your phone to a kid, right?
Absolutely.
So, but that's the scary part.
And here's the thing, though. Here's the craziest part. It's that you're saying that there aren't any repercussions, but science is showing that there are actual physical manifestations of those repercussions.
I said there are repercussions,
but we don't know exactly.
We don't know the exact. Yeah.
But what I'm saying is that this research is showing that the shape of our hands are physically changing because we use our thumbs so much that the muscle in our thumbs is drastically increasing. So the shape of our hand will change over time.
Well, that's pretty crazy.
That's what I'm saying, man.
That's insane. What?
Yeah, because most of us will have more physical activity with our thumbs than our ancestors ever did in their whole life. Think about that.
Dang, shout out to technology.
I mean, it's literally causing a change in our physiology. So, that's that.
I mean, that makes sense. Yeah.
But here's what I am curious about, Andrew. So you work for a tech company. I know tech companies have a very specific kind of culture. We think about tech, it's all about flexible working hours. Ability to work wherever you want, having a very kind of progressive kind of culture. Maybe you got kombucha on tap. You got nitro coffee on tap. You got, in your case, free avocados. So I'm curious,
Free avocados?
Shout out to LiveRamp.
So I'm curious about what that culture is like for you. What's your experience been like?
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely a culture shock coming from American Express, where things are a lot, it's a huge corporation, global corporation with 50K plus employees, to go to a tech company that has fewer than, at the time, I think 1,000 employees, right? Yeah. So just even from a cultural standpoint, definitely different. One of the biggest changes was it was kind of nice to get on Slack, actually.
Slack's great.
Slack is awesome.
Like before I was on Slack, I didn't get it. I was like, this is just another text messaging app. What's the point of this? But once you start using it, you're like, yo,
it's a game changer for sure.
This is a game changer.
The fact that you can have a group chat with your entire company is pretty mind blowing.
Absolutely.
And that's not something we had at Amex. And so I think, the level of collaboration that is possible, at these type of environments, is just really interesting. It's very different from American Express. We didn't obviously have all of the perks that a lot of the startups and technology firms offer. So that was also a big plus. But yeah,
for sure. Oh, what's that? What's up, Roy?
It's okay.
And here's the craziest thing, because I recently went and had some drinks with some of Andrew's coworkers and friends, and I thought it was so interesting because I feel like relationally, the people that are kind of like, funneled into tech companies are, number one, very different, very like progressive in that kind of way. But number two, I think it's so interesting because, Andrew being a Christian, being, pastor's kid and all that, your company, like, you have a very interesting relationship with your coworkers, if I can like be really honest with you. He's very, very open and like outspoken about being a Christian, and like it's almost like in some ways he is labeled as, oh yeah, that guy's a Christian dude, but it's like in a way where it's like he's not really like a Ned Flanders. He's not really kind of like the dude that like, oh, like he must be a bigot. Oh, he must be like a xenophobic, like homophobic kind of dude. And so I'm curious, like, what's it like being a Christian navigating in that kind of space?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And, ironically enough, you say that like, you said that like LiveRamp is, and tech companies in general might be even a little more progressive and a little more liberal.
Sure.
I would alter that statement a little bit and say, I think these companies are not necessarily just more liberal and that's it, or are, more progressive and that's it. I think that's a little simplistic. I think really my work environment, I appreciate it so much, is very open, accepting, and diverse. And I think, that applies even to me. I can be open about my life, my experiences, where I came from, my thoughts and processes in my head, and people take that seriously.
Sure.
Honestly, these are things that maybe I wouldn't have been as open about, in the workplace at somewhere like American Express, because almost ironically, because of how big it is and because of how maybe not as open and diverse as it is, that I felt maybe a little bit of pressure to kind of not, leave my personal life aside. But at LiveRamp, honestly, what I love so much is that people are very curious about who you are, what you're up to. People are very curious about
beyond like just like working, beyond like, what do you provide to your job?
Exactly. And also, we have conversations that just allow for that. And we can just kind of like chat over lunch, and people are very open to that. And so in that way, it was almost refreshing to me of how liberal it was. I was able to even talk about my faith even more. So in that way, like it was definitely encouraging. I'm not out there openly like, hey, let's go to church. Let's, do this
Even
and that.
still though, the fact that, your friends all know that you are Christian, I think that's pretty crazy because like, I'm not like that. Are you like that, Alex? Like, I don't know.
People about at the same time, I also work at a startup too.
Oh,
It's
you've also got a tech
something.
atmosphere too, right? Yeah, I guess it's a little bit different.
I think that's so interesting that you say that, because you would think at American Express there would be a lot more diversity because of how big the company is, but
more opportunity
to do that. But these are my words and not yours, but I would think that if you work at a big company like that, maybe you feel so insignificant and so small. You're just like an ID number.
Yeah, right.
You saying that you're Christian, it won't really have too much of an impact. Like, you're just an employee at Amex, right? But when you join a startup, it's a lot smaller group of people. And I like how you said not coworkers, but these are your friends. So people are actually genuinely interested in you. And it also kind of goes back to that the Slack where everybody's in the same chat. Everyone's in the same chat, so people can just message each other, and the relationship just happens a little bit more organically, I think. So you just naturally, you saying you're Christian, I think would have a lot more impact in your startup than you saying you're Christian at Amex. They'll be like, okay, cool, another Christian person, or oh, cool,
right.
Another non-Christian person.
And I only said that because, like, for me, I think it's very different, his experience at work versus my experience at work, in that, like, I don't really go out to, like, work to, like, with the intention of making a lot of friends. I'm really there just to, like, work, do my job, do well, get a paycheck, come home, like, sure, like, pleasantries in terms of like, hey, how you been? That kind of stuff. Like, sure, like, I'll talk about that. But the fact that I feel like Andrew's on a different level where he really shares his life. He really invests in people. And he has so many opportunities to even talk about being Christian. I think that's what's so interesting.
Yeah, and just to kind of like clarify, definitely as I make this compare and contrast, I wouldn't say like, my previous workplace, it was like not open and not diverse. That wasn't the case at all. I think it's more so the vibe that you have on a really, like, this is like an unwritten thing, right? Like a vibe that you have that you feel like you can be more expressive and honest about yourself. Not to say you can't make relationships in a big corporate setting. Some of my closest friends are from Amex, and we still keep in touch and hang out. And so I think it's not necessarily like the company's fault. It's like kind of the vibe. And so, yeah, and I think the reason that I am not afraid to kind of talk about it and be open about my faith and my kind of beliefs is because of that openness. And it's not even something that I just bring up randomly. I don't go in, roll in on a Monday morning and say, "Hey."
Oh, that's true. That's true.
Yeah, I'm sure
That's
someone.
true.
I'm sure someone's asking like, "Oh, what are you doing this weekend?" or something, and you go, "Oh, I'm going to church on Sunday," or something like that.
Right.
That's
Yeah,
what I
what
usually
is the
do.
opening? What's the what's the little like slide in? I'd love to learn.
Yeah, no, it's not. I don't have like
It's
a.
not a technique. Is what he's trying to say. It's happening naturally. Is
I
what
see.
he's
That's
saying.
my bad.
Yeah.
I think
my
that's
bad.
what it is. So it's not like, hey, like Monday morning rolls in, like, yo, can you check on this thing for me? And also, do you want to go to church with me? Like,
Sure,
that's
sure.
not it at all. It's more so just a genuine curiosity of how people were brought up, how people think, what they do with their spare time, what they think about, their like philosophies on money, on work, on career, what their identity is. These are things that I'm curious about, and I try my best to be respectful about it. Of course,
Of course, absolutely.
we're all like, we all came up differently, and I'm very just curious about how other people grew up, and I think that's
Right,
kind of where it goes.
Yeah, I mean, we had a conversation about this yesterday about like genuine curiosity versus transactional relationships.
That's true. That's true.
So when you have an actual genuine interest in someone, you just naturally have these kind of conversations, even if you're at work, right? Because you can't just be like working nonstop, like, hey, did you do this? Hey, did you do that? Like, you have to kind of like segue into other conversations, like, how was your weekend? What were you struggling with? I remember you had that big like meet that was coming up this Saturday. How did you do? And then you just say, oh yeah, I also went to a church retreat on this past weekend. And you talk
Interesting.
about where you went. Maybe we could say we went to Princeton, New Jersey, and then you
Sure.
talk about that.
Sure.
Just-
That being said, though, like,
Yeah.
have you ever felt any stigma against you because of the label that you self-proclaim?
Definitely not stigma, but
Really, I feel like that's so interesting because I feel like nowadays, especially in this country, there's so much stigma about being Christian. So,
no, of course. I don't go in there and do it in such a way that I'm like not thinking about what I'm talking about. I am very intentional that I'm honest, I'm transparent, and I am being genuine, but at the same time representing my faith and my background in a way that is honest, but also is good. I'm not hiding anything, but for me, what irks me is when someone just puts on a face and they can't be honest with me.
oh, interesting. You want to get to the core. You want to,
Of course,
go past that fact.
Because I think that what are friends if you don't? What are deep relationships if you don't understand the person and if the person doesn't understand you, right? And for me, you say like you go to a workplace and maybe you're not looking for friends. For me, I'm not like, looking for friends either, but it's also like, why not kill two birds with one stone? Like if you're going to have a working relationship with someone, might as well like have a good time with it. And so for me, it's like, it's almost like an efficiency play here. It's like, might as well
maximize the opportunity that's available.
Exactly. I'm spending 8
that
to
makes
9 hours with these people a day. Like I want to have a good time with them. And for me to really develop those relationships, I just want to know them. I want them to know me. And I feel like it would be a disservice if I were to just sugarcoat things and just hide things. And so, yeah.
And I think it comes from, and I kind of had the same sentiment as Harrison when I first started my job too, was these are coworkers and I have my own friends. But after working together for 4 years, you kind of have to, or forced to, or whatever, willingly get
Eventually
to know someone.
get close
you
to
get
them.
you get to know them, right? But I think when you have that kind of mentality of just transactional, or these are just my coworkers, maybe you have your half of your intentions are already like thinking about what's my next step. Like maybe I don't want to be here at this company, so I don't want to overcommit this relationship because you might never see these people again, right? But I think a lot of those things go through your mind where like, oh, do I really want these people to know my personal life? And I came here to do my job, and all of these things like definitely do go racing through my head. But eventually I think you kind of get to that point of getting to know someone and genuinely are interested in their lives. Yeah.
Sure. Let me ask you a different question then. To take it in a different aspect, have you ever felt any stigma or any struggle from being Asian in your whole career?
No.
Wow, that's very interesting.
I mean, I think
conceptually, there's like the whole like bamboo ceiling. You know what I mean? It's like Asians are capped at a certain place. They're not ever promoted. They're not the first to become a leader. Like, so I'm curious, like if you ever felt that or ever saw that.
Yeah, well, I think that specifically, like the bamboo ceiling, I think isn't something that necessarily affects Asians. Not to downplay it, but I personally think it's more reflected in the upper level, in the executive level. This
Sure.
is why we don't see as many Asian CEOs
Sure.
and executives. But in the independent contributor as well, individual contributor as well as middle management level, I think I don't know if that's necessarily a problem. So, and just to clarify that, it's not that Asian Americans don't struggle with any discrimination or anything in the workplace. I'm not an expert there, so
Sure.
I won't have any professional thoughts on that. But personally, I don't think that I have, especially because I've worked in environments both Amex and at LiveRamp, where Asians are not necessarily the minority in such a way that it's hard for me to do my job well, or it's hard for me to show that I'm doing my job well. And so I guess in a sense, like that's a little bit of privilege.
But on top of that, you've never felt like you were ever passed up for like an opportunity, or like you didn't have the same access to opportunities like maybe other people?
Yeah, I know that can happen. I've been fortunate not to experience that. So
That's awesome.
For me, yeah. How about you guys?
I mean, for me, especially in like the media advertising industry, I would say the same thing where it's like when we're talking about senior leadership, VP up, like partner level people, like there is a huge cutoff. I do see a lot of Asians working, in the entry to senior to like middle management, but as soon as we go past that, like there's a huge cutoff. And in that way, I haven't ever been passed up on an opportunity because of like simply being Asian, but I do see that there is kind of this huge filter where for some reason it's just like all of a sudden the Asians disappear at a certain level. And so that's why I ask, because that I always talk about this with like a lot of my people. Like it's very strange. Advertising industry is very interesting where, especially in the agency side, it's actually pretty dominated by females. Even still though, we're talking about senior, like high level executive, like CEO types, is still going to be all male. And so in that way, women are still like fighting for those positions, those seats at the table. But when I talk to my senior leader, like my female senior leadership, I always tell them, hey, look, like as much as you're fighting for those seats at those tables, like Asians are still fighting for the seats at your table. And they're like, oh, wow, thank you so much, Harrison, for telling me that. I had no idea.
Yeah.
Like, thank you for putting that to my attention. And that's why I'm asking.
Yeah, that's an interesting idea. I mean, I think personally for me, I think I see that for Asians in general, like and how we're raised up, we're raised up to be very good, I think, technical skilled workers.
Sure.
So even for me as a software engineer, generally it's really hard to transition from software engineering to a leadership role because there isn't like a very clear path on how do you suddenly become a good manager from being a good coder, right? Maybe your role is a little bit different because you are interacting with clients. You kind of have to understand the mood of the room, and in similar ways, you kind of translate that into, if I'm working with my employee and I'm their manager, or if I'm their CEO, or if I'm their vice president, you kind of understand the sense of the room. But I think in Asians in general, we're so focused on, or we're taught by our parents in a way to like do good in school, get good grades, but that doesn't necessarily translate well into like how do you understand the room? Like how do you understand the vibe of your employees and things like that? And that I think sometimes puts us at a hindrance.
Absolutely. Yeah. And like even beyond that, it's like for us, I feel like it's a relational thing. So I work in a very service industry. Like, so it's like I'm trying to build relationships with my clients. I want my clients to trust me and continue to give me their business. And in many ways, sometimes I do feel like, non-Asian people feel a little bit of a barrier. They're like, oh, like this guy's Asian. I don't know. Like, how should I talk to him? Like, what do I talk to him about? Do I talk to him about sports?
Interesting.
That's honestly, I feel that way. I feel in some ways like left out, and I have to like become, more like whatever the average is in the room. And so, and that's why I was just curious. But it's great that you don't have that same experience, or I don't know if you know.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't had that experience really, so I'm very fortunate for that and grateful for my leaders for providing that. And kind of to your point about like, not necessarily every individual contributor is necessarily going to be a good manager.
Right.
I mean, I would agree with that, because I don't think a good manager is necessarily someone who does the job that you're doing really well. I think a good manager is someone who can empathize with you and can understand what's blocking you from doing your job well, and able to remove those blockers, and at the same time advocate
Right.
for you.
Yeah,
Right.
Facts.
so like I think
which is
true.
why there are so many bad bosses.
Yeah.
There are so many bad
But luckily,
bosses.
I've been very blessed with some good managers.
That's
so-
a dime a dozen, though. That's
I
a
know.
very rare thing.
And I think that's what LiveRamp does really well. So I really am just thankful for that. But I know I'm kind of in a minority here. So,
Man, that's awesome.
but
Well, as we wrap up our time, we always want to end our podcast with this segment. We like to call it Hot Steaks.
hot steaks.
And so, hot steaks.
Steaks.
So I'm curious, man. Like, this is a question we'd like to ask people. What's probably one of the hardest things you had to go through this year? What was different about this year from other years beyond, like, pandemic, quarantine? What was personal to you that was probably pretty tough?
Man, that's a tough question.
Because it's like a different context. You know what I mean? When we used to ask this question, like we weren't in this situation.
Yeah, that's true. And I mean, I don't know if we ever dived in that deeply, but now I'm curious.
Oh, can you just get in frame a little bit? I feel like you're a little not in frame.
Yeah, people got to see your face, Andrew, while you give us this big answer right now.
Hello, people. Honestly, this year, I think I've been really forced to deal with the fact that that I don't have control over, life.
Damn.
And you guys know me pretty well at this point. Like, I love to have control. I love to know what's going on.
Who
And,
doesn't?
But I feel like, particularly.
Yeah, he's pretty amplified. 10X.
Particularly, I like to, have some understanding of this situation that's happening, and but this year, with the pandemic, with all the riots, with all the racism, with all just, everything that's
Political
happening,
strife.
with not even being able to go to church, not even being able to travel, not being able to do normal things, it's been tough. It's been tough to have to react to that and completely lose control over my life in that regard, like being able to do what you want to do. And
Sure.
for me, that's been hard. And so, yeah, that's been challenging. I think, to get a little spiritual here, I think it was a healthy reminder that our lives are not in our control, but that God is sovereign. And so, I just got to trust in Him. But that's what I'm trying to learn. And it's been a challenging but rewarding lesson to be able to let go in some regards. You can't have control over everything in life, but we can let go and kind of trust that it's going to happen.
Oh, that's a good answer. Good answer.
No, I mean, on that positive note, we just want to thank you so much for spending the time to do this podcast with us. It's been a long time coming, and so we're so glad to have you. And for everyone else, make sure you follow us on Instagram. It's at Did You Eat Podcast. Did You Eat Yet Podcast, excuse me. We're also on YouTube and your favorite apps, Spotify, Google Play a Podcast, Apple Music. We're everywhere where you'd probably find us. So make sure you follow us. Make sure you smash that subscribe and like button on YouTube. And we'll see you next week.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.